Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we take really compelling, sometimes complex source material, and we break it down systematically.
Yeah, we get into the essentials, the core knowledge you need to, well, to be truly informed.
We aim to cut through all the noise, skip the easy assumptions, and get right to those profound insights that are often hidden in the text.
And today, our mission, if you will, is a really rigorous, focused exploration. We're diving deep into Psalm 139, just an incredible piece of poetry and theology from the Old Testament.
And this isn't just a casual glance. We're doing a proper deep dive here.
That's right. It's a structured analysis, and it's based entirely on a recent, very thorough sermon by Dr. Joshua Nichols. He's the PhD pastor at Faithful to the Word Ministries.
Okay, so Dr. Nichols' sermon is our primary source.
Correct. And what he does, which is really helpful, is take David's reflection in the psalm and frame it around four key attributes of God. His omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, and holiness.
And he applies them directly, personally.
Directly to the life of the believer. That's the power of it. It brings these huge theological concepts right down to earth.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to pull out those spiritual nuggets from the sermon. We want to give you clarity, right? Actionable understanding of this amazing psalm.
Exactly. We want you walking away feeling like you didn't just hear what the psalm says, but you get why it matters. Like profoundly matters to your own identity, your security.
And the sermon kicks off right away with something that I think hooks you instantly. It addresses this really deep human thing, a tension we all feel.
Ah, yes. What Dr. Nichols calls the paradox of being known.
Okay, let's unpack that. The paradox of being known. Because, that hits home immediately.
Yeah.
We all have this fundamental craving, don't we?
We absolutely do.
To be truly intimately known, we want someone to just get us, see past the masks, understand our inner world.
Yeah, that validation, someone who sees behind the curtain. It's a deep, deep desire.
And here's a paradox. Running right alongside that craving is this intense fear.
The terror of exposure.
Exactly. What if being fully known means they see the worst parts, the secrets, the envy, the selfishness?
And what if seeing that leads to rejection, total rejection? It's vulnerability pushed to its absolute limit. That's the fear.
So this sermon basically positions Psalm 139 as God's answer to that very paradox.
It suggests the psalm kind of gently removes that fig leaf we try to wear even before God.
Revealing that the one who knows us perfectly down to the core
is the same one who, because of his covenant love, chooses to love us completely anyway, despite knowing it all.
That's the turning point, isn't it? Why David can move from maybe apprehension to outright worship.
Precisely. He grasps that God's total knowledge isn't paired with condemnation, but with this persistent, pursuing grace.
Now, Dr. Nichols structured the sermon around four distinct movements in the psalm, which is super helpful. It gives us a roadmap.
It really does. It flows logically. God knows me, God surrounds me, God forms me, and then finally, God leads me.
That's a beautiful progression, from the deepest internal knowledge of self all the way to our ultimate God-given destiny.
It really is. And, just as a bit of context, Charles Spurgeon, the great preacher, he called Psalm 139 the crown of all the psalms. That gives you a sense of its weight.
Wow, the crown.
And the sermon really stresses this isn't about reciting cold doctrine about God's attributes. It's not abstract.
No.
It's meant to be doxology, theology that sung, felt, lived from the heart. It's worship rooted in truth.
That's powerful. Okay, before we dive into that first movement, God knows me, we do need to share something important with you, our listeners.
Yes, absolutely.
If the kind of theological depth we're exploring here in Psalm 139 resonates with you, if it sparks your spiritual or even just your intellectual curiosity, we really encourage you to visit the Faithful to the Word Ministries website.
That's faithfultotheword.com. Easy to remember.
On the site, you'll find a lot more resources connected to this specific sermon we're discussing, plus Dr. Nichols' entire teaching archive, which is expensive. And you can also explore ways to support the ministry's work.
And it's important to know, Faithful to the Word Ministries is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. They rely completely on donations.
That's right. Your support is what makes it possible for them to keep sharing these deep biblical insights with people all over the world. So please consider making a donation if you feel led. You can do that at faithfultotheword.com.
Okay, so let's start where David starts. With this truth that just shatters all our masks and facades. God knows me perfectly, The omniscience of God, Psalm 139.1-6.
Right out of the gate, the sermon jumps into the sheer power, the penetrating power of a God's knowledge. It
Yeah.
takes us way beyond just God being vaguely aware of us.
Oh, definitely. It's about the exhaustive nature of it. David starts, verses 1 and 2. O Lord, you've searched me and known me.
Searched and known.
And the sermon emphasizes that really getting these opening lines hinges on understanding the specific Hebrew verbs David chose. These aren't just throwaway words.
Okay, let's stop there. We need to drill down on that. What are those verbs and why are they so significant?
So the first one, searched, is the Hebrew word vekwar, pronounced something like shakar. And this word is incredibly strong. It's not like a casual glance around.
Not just looking.
No. It implies a deep, penetrating, exhaustive examination. Think of like a miner digging deep into the earth, searching for that hidden vein of gold.
Or maybe like a forensic scientist looking for the absolute root cause of something.
Exactly. It suggests investigation, probing, drilling down to the deepest, most hidden layers of reality. It's thorough.
So God isn't just looking at the surface stuff. He's doing like a spiritual MRI scan, right down to the marrow of our intentions, our thoughts.
That's a great analogy.
Mhm.
And that intense searching is complemented by the second verb, known. That's yada in Hebrew, pronounced yada. Now, while Oakwood talks about the method of discovery, Yoda describes the kind of knowledge God has. In Hebrew, yada is very often used for intimate, personal, covenantal knowledge, sometimes even marital intimacy.
Wow. So not just intellectual facts.
Not at all. It signifies deep personal connection, relational familiarity, knowing someone, not just knowing about them.
So if we put those two verbs together, God has probed us exhaustively.
Right.
But not like some detached investigator, but within the context of an intimate relationship. Wow.
Precisely. The knowledge he has is comprehensive, yes, but it's also profoundly personal. It's relational reality, not just abstract data.
And the sermon points out how this exhaustive knowledge touches every single part of our daily lives, even the mundane stuff.
Every bit. He sees you when you sit down, totally exhausted. He sees you when you rise up to face whatever the day holds, when you're walking through a busy street, or when you're lying down alone at night. It's all under his observation.
What really jumps out from the text, though, is how proactive this knowledge is. It's not like God's just watching what we do and reacting.
Verse 4 is stunning.
Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all.
Just pause on that. He understands your thoughts from afar, before the word is on your tongue.
That means he knows not just what you actually say.
The motive behind it,
Yeah.
the hesitation you felt, the intention, even the words you thought about saying but then held back.
It just completely demolishes any idea that we have some private inner life hidden from God.
There's no hiding place.
But, okay, here's a question that always comes up. If God knows the word on my tongue before I even speak it, how does the sermon handle the whole free will thing? Does his perfect knowledge mean we're just puppets? Does it imply determinism?
Yeah, that's the classic theological tension, isn't it? The sermon addresses it by clarifying the nature of God's omniscience. God's knowledge is perfect, it's eternal, it exists outside of our timeline. But his knowing doesn't cause our choice. It perfectly registers our choice. He knows the whole timeline, past, present, future, all at once, you could say. Our choices within that reality are genuine.
So our freedom is real, but God's knowledge of how we'll use that freedom is absolute.
That's the idea the sermon presents. And it emphasizes that David's awe, his wonder, it doesn't come from feeling predetermined. It comes from realizing his deepest inner self is fully known by his Creator, the one who loves him.
Which brings us back to David's reaction in verse 6. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain to it. He's overwhelmed, but it sounds like wonder, not terror.
Exactly. Wonder, not withdrawal. And the sermon highlights the two sides of this knowledge, this exposure.
Okay, what are the two sides?
On the one hand, it's incredibly comforting. Think about it. To be completely known, completely seen, especially when the world misunderstands you or when you feel utterly alone. Someone knows the real you.
That is comforting.
But on the other hand, it's intensely convicting. Because if he knows everything, there's no hiding place for sin. No secret thought or motive is safe from the eyes of the Holy One. We're totally exposed before perfect holiness.
The sermon then deepens this, right? By framing God's omniscience not just generally, but specifically as a covenantal attribute. Why is that distinction, general awareness versus covenantal knowledge, so important for a believer?
It's critical. Because think about it. General awareness from some all-powerful entity could just be surveillance, cold, impersonal, maybe even hostile, like Big Brother watching.
Right, that sounds terrifying.
But covenantal knowledge means the one who knows David, who knows you so perfectly, is the same God who has entered into a binding relationship. The God who created you, who promises to redeem you, who loves you.
So the knowledge is soaked in relationship, in intimacy.
Yes, the ultimate security isn't found in trying to hide, but in being fully known by a faithful, loving God.
To sharpen this point, the sermon contrasts David's worshipful awe with the kind of existential dread felt by someone like the atheist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah, that's a really powerful comparison. Sartre, writing in the mid-20th century, was obsessed with the terror of being constantly watched and judged. His play No Exit is all about this.
Hell is other people, right? The inescapable gaze.
Exactly, because in his worldview, without a loving, relational God, being known is the ultimate invasion. It crushes authentic freedom, leads to constant shame. He saw the other's gaze, which he often linked to the traditional idea of God, as purely condemning.
So for the unbeliever, maybe like Sartre, omniscience feels like invasion, like judgment. But for the believer, thanks to Psalm 139, it's transformed into a treasure, a promise of intimacy.
That's the transformation. So when you struggle with self-doubt or anxiety or that feeling that nobody really understands the pressures you're under,
You can anchor yourself in the truth that your Father already knows it all, intimately.
and this applies directly to our struggles with anxiety and sin too. The sermon makes it clear. God knows your anxieties before you can even put them into words in prayer.
He knows the mess before you even try to clean it up for him.
And he knows your sins before you confess them. Now, realizing that does two things. First, yes, it humbles us. We can't pretend. We can't put on a show of righteousness.
Right, no more masks.
But second, and this is incredibly freeing, it offers immediate healing. Because you can skip the pretense. You can go straight to honest dependence, knowing he already knows the truth.
Okay, but how does that level of exposure lead to healing and not just, deeper shame or humiliation?
Yeah.
That only really works if the gospel is factored in, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's the crucial link. The ultimate gospel application the sermon presents is precisely this. The cross is the proof.
Proof of what?
Proof that God knows the absolute worst about you. He knows every selfish thought, every hidden action, every shame you try desperately to bury. And still, he chose love. He initiated the covenant of grace despite his perfect knowledge of our sinfulness.
Wow. So the message is, stop trying to impress God. Stop trying to manage his perception of you.
It's pointless. He knows you too well for that performance. In Christ, you are fully known and yet completely irreversibly loved.
That's incredibly liberating.
It is. That's the irreversible proof of his love. But the sermon also makes sure we don't forget the flip side, the consequence of this perfect knowledge for those outside of Christ. It brings in some strong scriptural support here.
Like what?
It cites Ecclesiastes 12, verses 13 and 14, which warn that God will bring every act to judgment. Everything hidden, whether it's good or evil, nothing escapes.
And Matthew's gospel, too.
Yes, Matthew 12.36. Jesus is warning that we'll have to give an account for every careless word we speak. It just underscores the comprehensive, inescapable scope of God's perfect knowledge. It covers everything.
Every action, every thought, every word. Okay. This thorough understanding of God's knowledge naturally leads to the next big questions David tackles, doesn't it? If God knows everything about me, does he also know everywhere I could possibly go? Is there any place I could hide?
It's the perfect logical transition. We move from the depth of what God knows to the sheer, staggering expanse of where God is.
Okay, so now we're into the second movement identified in the sermon. God surrounds me completely, the omnipresence of God. David's focus shifts, moving from his inner world to the vast universe outside.
That's right. And he asks these profound rhetorical questions in verses 7 and 8. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence?
They're rhetorical, obviously, but they carry this huge weight of realization, like the answer is clearly nowhere.
Nowhere. But again, the sermon really digs into the motivation behind David asking these questions. It's crucial.
What's the motivation then? It's not fear.
Not for David, no. These aren't the desperate cries of a fugitive trying to escape some cosmic detective. They're born out of sheer amazement. It's the wonder of a worshiper realizing the scale of his God.
So David doesn't see God as a cosmic warden trying to track him down.
No, he sees him as the ever-present shepherd. For the believer, the fact that you can't escape God's presence is the ultimate comfort, not a threat. He's always there.
Let's look at the poetic language David uses to illustrate this incredible reach. He covers the absolute extremes, doesn't he? Highest and lowest.
He does. Verse 8, "If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there."
Okay, unpack Sheol for us. It doesn't quite mean hell as we often think of it today, right?
Right. In this Old Testament context, Sheol generally refers to the realm of the dead, the grave. It's the lowest, deepest, most hidden place imaginable, often associated with shadows, silence, the underworld.
So heaven is the highest point of glory. Sheol is the lowest point of existence, maybe even death.
And David says God is fully present in both. Whether you're experiencing the height of spiritual ecstasy or the depths of despair, even death itself, God is undeniably there. There's no dimension, spiritual or physical, that God doesn't fill.
And then the psalm stretches this idea out geographically and even relates it to time using this amazing ancient imagery.
Yes, the sermon detailed this beautifully. Verse 9, "If I take the wings of the dawn."
Wings of the dawn, what does that signify?
It's poetic imagery for incredible speed, like the speed of light as dawn breaks across the sky. It also points to the eastern extreme, where the sun rises.
Okay, so traveling incredibly fast to the furthest east.
And then he contrasts it, "and dwell in the remotest part of the sea." This represents the absolute western horizon, the edge of the known world from their perspective, the most distant, isolated place you could imagine.
So maximum speed to the most remote location. He's covering all the bases.
He is. And what's truly remarkable is his conclusion. Even if he could somehow reach that place of ultimate isolation.
He finds he's not abandoned.
Exactly. Verse 10, "Even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me."
That changes everything. Omnipresence isn't just God being everywhere like the air, it's his hand being there.
Yes. It shifts from abstract doctrine to intensely relational assurance. The hand that leads is the hand that guides, protects, comforts. It means whether you feel geographically alone, spiritually dry, mentally lost in despair, God's presence is already there, surrounding you, holding you.
That mention of despair brings us right to the powerful metaphor of darkness in verses 11 and 12. Darkness for us usually symbolizes what? Ignorance, sin, fear, depression.
All of those. It's where we might try to hide, thinking our problems or our shame are too deep, too dark to be seen or dealt with.
We might even deceive ourselves in the dark.
Absolutely. But the sermon highlights the stunning divine counter-truth in verse 12. To God, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are the same to him.
That's radical. The shadows that hide us from other people, maybe even from ourselves sometimes.
Offers zero barrier to God's sight. Zero. The believer cannot be lost to God's presence because his sight pierces every shadow, every pretense.
Now, this idea of God's omnipresence, that he is literally everywhere, is something most believers would probably affirm intellectually. Yeah, God is everywhere.
Sure, it's a standard doctrine.
But the sermon introduced a really crucial theological nuance here, something that makes it intensely personal. It drew a distinction between God's spatial presence and his redemptive presence. How did the sermon explain that difference?
This is subtle, but it's foundational. God's presence is indeed everywhere spatially. He fills and sustains the entire universe. He's the bedrock of all existence, you could say.
Okay, so that's the spatial aspect. He's just there everywhere.
Right. But for the person who is in Christ, that presence shifts. It's no longer just a metaphysical fact about the universe. It becomes a relational covenantal assurance. Meaning, for the Christian, God's omnipresence means he is universally present as your shepherd, as your father, as your redeemer. His presence is now filtered through his saving relationship with you.
So back in Genesis 3, Adam ran from God's presence in fear after sinning. But the believer finds comfort and stability in that same presence because of Christ. Like Jesus' promise, I am with you always.
That's the redemptive difference. Which inevitably leads to maybe the most challenging, even controversial clarification in this section. The sermon handled it very carefully, theologically speaking.
Which is?
The nature of God's presence in hell.
Yes. That's a tough one. Because the common idea, or maybe misconception, is that hell is total separation from God. That's its defining feature.
Right. And while that idea tries to capture the horror of hell, the sermon argues it's theologically imprecise when you hold it up against the doctrine of God's absolute omnipresence.
So if God is truly omnipresent,
then he must, by definition, be present even in hell. God is everywhere. The crucial question isn't if he's there, but how he is present there.
Okay, so how did the sermon explain the difference between God's presence in heaven versus his presence in hell?
It used a contrasting framework. In heaven, God is fully present. and those there experience and enjoy the blessing side of his holy character. His love, his mercy, his grace, his goodness, his fellowship. God is the God of heaven, pouring out his benevolent attributes.
Okay. And in hell.
Because God is omnipresent, he must also be the God of hell. So, yes, he is present there too. But in hell, his presence is experienced as the terrifying, inescapable reality of his wrath, his righteous anger, his perfect justice against unrepentant sin and rebellion.
Wow. So the separation in hell isn't separation from God's existence.
No, it's separation from God's blessing, separation from his favor, his mercy, his redemptive grace. The suffering is arguably intensified because the wicked are facing the full, direct, unavoidable presence of God in his holy wrath. There's no escape from the judge.
That completely reframes the common picture. It's not God abandoning hell, it's God being present in judgment.
Exactly. It removes the idea that hell is just some place where God throws up his hands and leaves people alone. Instead, it's the ultimate, terrifying realization of being utterly unable to escape God's pure, holy justice. The separation isn't spatial, it's relational and judicial.
And understanding that really throws the meaning of salvation into sharp relief, doesn't it? It gives the gospel its true context.
It absolutely does. If God is present everywhere, including in the manifestation of his wrath against sin, then salvation means being rescued from that very wrath.
From God, by God.
Yes. When we talk about Jesus bearing the wrath of God for us on the cross, he was experiencing precisely that, the full measure of God's just anger against our rebellion. He faced God's presence in wrath so that we could face God's presence in grace.
That deep dive into omnipresence really transforms it. It's not just an abstract idea about space anymore. It's the deepest possible comfort for those who are saved, knowing they've been delivered from facing God's presence in judgment.
It is. And it leads us perfectly into the next movement of the psalm. If God knows us perfectly, and he surrounds us completely, well, how did we even come to be here in the first place? David turns to God's power in creating us.
Yeah, this shift in focus is incredibly moving. We zoom out from the vastness of heaven and Sheol, the whole universe.
Right down to the most intimate, hidden place, the womb.
This is section 3. God forms me intricately, the omnipotence of God in creation. David starts marveling at God's power, but not in the stars or mountains this time. It's in the microcosm of his own physical formation.
And the focus here is on God's omnipotence, displayed as intricate, loving artistry. The sermon really draws attention to the verbs David uses. They're described as beautifully tender.
Tender verbs, like what?
Words like formed, wove, made, and skillfully wrought. These aren't words you associate with, say, brute force or mechanical assembly. They're the words of a craftsman, an artist, carefully working on a precious project.
The sermon used an analogy, didn't it? That God isn't like a factory owner mass-producing widgets.
Exactly. He's portrayed more like a master weaver, creating each person like a unique, incredibly detailed tapestry. Thread by painstaking thread.
Which leads David to burst out in verse 14, I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
And that phrase, fearfully and wonderfully made, we hear it a lot, but the sermon unpacked its real weight.
What's the depth there?
Fearfully points to the awe, the reverence we should have when contemplating the sheer complexity and, honestly, the fragility of human life. It's astounding. And wonderfully speaks to the miracle of it, the uniqueness, the intricacy of the design.
So it affirms that every single human life is sacred, designed, purposeful.
Absolutely. The whole secular idea that we're just, accidental byproducts of random biological chance, this psalm completely demolishes that. You weren't an accident, you were deliberate artistry.
I think we need to spend a moment on that poetic metaphor David uses for the room. He describes being skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. That language takes the hiddenness, the security of the womb, and makes it sound almost mystical, sacred.
It really does. The depths of the earth is likely a metaphor for a place that's hidden, profound, protected, far away from the chaos and visibility of the surface world. It sanctifies the whole process of gestation.
And being skillfully wrought or knitted together.
Yeah, the Hebrew word there, sakai, implies a very deliberate, complex weaving or assembly. Like all the intricate parts, the nervous system, circulatory system, bones, organs, are being meticulously put together and coordinated according to a divine blueprint.
Okay, so given that powerful theological statement about sanctity and intentionality in our very creation, what does the sermon say this means for our self-worth? So many people struggle with feeling inadequate or despairing over their flaws or failures.
The sermon presents this truth as the ultimate antidote to that kind of despair and self-hatred. It's incredibly direct.
How so?
If you are struggling with your identity, feeling worthless, maybe believing the lie that you're just a mistake, Psalm 139 confronts that head on. God saw you, specifically you, not as just some blob of unformed potential, but as his masterpiece in progress, right from the very beginning.
So if God invested such intentional, intricate, omnipotent power into creating your physical being,
Then your life, your purpose cannot be cheap or accidental. Your inherent value is guaranteed by the intentionality of the artist himself. Period.
that focus on God's intention leads us to another really compelling, maybe complex theological idea in this section. The book, verse 16.
Ah, yes. The divine ledger, as some call it. Verse 16 says, Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was none of them.
What is this book? Is it a literal book in heaven with our names and dates?
The sermon explains it's almost certainly a metaphor, not a physical ledger, but a powerful image representing God's eternal decree, his sovereign plan and will by which all things unfold in history.
So it connects to God's overall sovereignty.
Exactly. The sermon links it directly to New Testament passages like Ephesians 1:11, which talks about God working all things according to the counsel of his will. It means nothing is random.
So this verse is making a profound statement about God's meticulous providence. Even before David drew his first breath, every single day of his life
The joys, the sorrows, the struggles, the quiet times.
was already known, planned, written in the eternal counsel of God.
Yes. And understanding that, truly grasping it, should produce a powerful dual response in us. Comfort and humility.
Comfort and humility, how?
Comfort, because we realize we're not just cosmic accidents drifting in chaos. We are souls known, loved, and guided by a Father who planned our existence down to the very number of our days. There's immense security in that.
Okay, that's the comfort. What about the humility?
Humility, because it reminds us that every single moment we live is a gift. It's not an entitlement. Our days are numbered, ordained by him. The sermon references Job 14.5 here. Since his days are determined, the number of his months is with you. We are stewards of borrowed, numbered time.
So how does the sermon specifically say this truth that we are intentionally created and our days ordained? How does it demolish both pride and despair? Right? They seem like opposites.
It cuts both ways. It demolishes pride because the instant you contemplate your intricate creation and God's sovereign plan for your life, you realize you're the creation, not the creator. You're the artwork, not the artist. You have absolutely nothing to boast about in your own making or your own plan.
Right. It puts us in our place.
And it demolishes despair because no matter what the world thinks of you, no matter your temporary failures or struggles, nothing can undo the fundamental decreed fact that God made you on purpose. Your life isn't discardable. It has inherent designed value decreed by God himself.
That's huge. And the sermon doesn't just leave this intentional creation in the past as something that happened in the womb and is finished. It connects it forward, doesn't it?
Yes, it brilliantly bridges this physical formation in the past with our ongoing spiritual transformation in the present and future. It moves from creation to consecration.
Consecration, movement.
Meaning this is the ultimate application of God's omnipotence to the believer's life now. If God so carefully, so powerfully wove our physical bodies together, shouldn't we trust him to be continually weaving our souls?
So this is about sanctification, becoming more like Christ.
Exactly. The sermon calls it God's ongoing embroidery. It cites 2 Corinthians 3.18 about being transformed into his likeness. Sanctification is presented as this continuous, lifelong, transformative process where God is knitting us, thread by careful thread, into the character and likeness of Jesus.
What does that knitting actually look like, practically, in day-to-day life?
Well, it looks like gradual refinement. It looks like patience being slowly woven into our irritable moments, endurance being knitted into times of weakness, self-control being applied stitch by stitch to our impulsive desires.
So it's not usually like a sudden lightning bolt zap.
Rarely. It's usually meticulous, divine artistry over a lifetime. Just like our physical bodies needed that hidden time in the womb to form, our spiritual selves, our souls, need that persistent, often quiet work of the Holy Spirit.
And this ongoing work confirms that the God who started the good work in us at creation
Will be faithful to complete it in glorification. Philippians 1:6.
that connection is really powerful. If God was so intimately present and powerful in forming us physically, we absolutely should trust him to be present and powerful in leading us spiritually, in holiness, toward our ultimate destiny.
Precisely. And that sets the stage perfectly for the final section of the psalm, which is also arguably the most challenging section.
Yeah, this is where Psalm 139 takes that famous, really abrupt turn. It feels jarring, honestly. We've been in this space of awe and wonder about creation.
The intimacy of the womb, God's gentle weaving.
And suddenly, bam, verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. We shift hard from introspection to confronting evil to spiritual warfare. It's
It
intense.
is a shocking transition, no doubt about it. And the sermon spends significant time unpacking this, stressing that we can't just conveniently ignore this part of the psalm because it makes us uncomfortable. We can't just cherry pick the nice verses.
So why the sudden shift? David was just contemplating God's perfection, his knowledge, presence, power.
And that's the key, according to the sermon. It's precisely because David has been meditating so deeply on God's absolute perfection, his holiness, that he feels compelled to react against everything that opposes that holiness. His reaction flows directly from his grasp of God's character.
So this isn't just David having a bad day and lashing out. It's not personal vengeance against someone who cut him off in traffic.
No, no. The sermon interprets it as flowing from a deep, settled, non-negotiable love for God's holy nature, and therefore a corresponding hatred for deliberate, defiant wickedness that attacks God's character and his people.
So it's about moral alignment first.
Yes, moral alignment above all. David is essentially declaring, Lord, because your ways are perfect, I must align myself with you. I have to hate the things you hate, the calculated rebellion, the violence, the injustice that opposes your divine order.
It's a zealous desire for God's justice to win out over evil and chaos.
Exactly. It's crucial to see it that way. The sermon clarifies that these imprecatory prayers, prayers calling for judgment, aren't a license for believers today to pursue personal vendettas. They're an expression of submitting to God's ultimate authority as the righteous judge of all the earth.
Okay, that makes sense contextually. But then David does something remarkable. He just prayed intensely for God to deal with the wicked.
Right. You'd almost expect him to end there, maybe feeling a bit self-righteous. Okay, God, go get him.
But he doesn't. He immediately pivots back to himself. He shifts into this incredibly intense self-examination. Why?
And that pivot right there is the absolute genius of the psalm and a core theological point in the sermon. David avoids the terrible trap of focusing only on the sins of others while ignoring the potential for evil within his own heart.
He avoids the splinter in the neighbor's eye, plank in your own problem.
Precisely. He seems to recognize that the same righteous zeal that condemns evil in others could very easily become corrupted in him. It could morph into bitterness, spiritual pride, or even a hidden desire for personal revenge.
That's a scary thought, that our own righteous anger could curdle into sin. The sermon mentioned Romans 12 here, didn't it?
Yes, Romans 12, verses 17 through 21, that whole passage about not repaying evil for evil, leaving vengeance to God, overcoming evil with good. David seems to instinctively understand that principle.
He realizes that if he truly wants to stand aligned with God's holiness, he needs more than just anger at external evil. He needs internal cleansing.
That's right. So the final verses brilliantly transform that imprecatory passion into a prayer of profound, ultimate surrender and purification.
Which brings us to that incredibly famous closing prayer, the invited search. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way or grievous way in me.
And just look at the deliberate structure, the symmetry. The psalm began with David acknowledging God's searching knowledge, akbar and yada, as a fact. God already knows.
Right, that was verse 1.
But it ends with David actively inviting that same search. What started as a statement of theological truth becomes a deeply personal, spiritual plea for purification.
He's basically saying, okay, God, you know everything anyway, so come on in. Probe deep, find the hidden stuff, diagnose me.
Yes, he's asking the great physician, as it were, to probe the hidden wounds, the secret infections of sin or bitterness or anxiety within his own soul, so that divine grace can come in and heal it.
To pray, search me, right after expressing such strong feelings about the wicked, that takes incredible humility and incredible faith.
It really does. He's inviting purification, not condemnation. Because, as we established back in the first section, for the believer in covenant with God, the condemnation for sin has already been dealt with.
Through Christ.
Through Christ. So David isn't asking for punishment here. He's asking for healing. And the profound reassurance from the sermon, the takeaway for us, is this.
What's the reassurance?
The safest place in the entire universe to be utterly, completely exposed is before the very one who already knows the absolute worst about you.
Who already bore all your shame on the cross.
And who searches you now only to cleanse and restore you, never to condemn you.
That's incredibly hopeful. God's intention in searching the believer's heart is always cleansing, always restoration.
He exposes sin in our lives not to destroy us or humiliate us, but to free us from it, to redeem us, to refine us, to bring us back into the light of his perfect fellowship. He exposes to heal.
And this whole incredible journey through God's knowledge, his presence, his creative power, and his purifying holiness culminates in David's final, beautiful, eternal request.
Verse 24, and lead me in the everlasting way.
The everlasting way. What does that mean?
This final petition brings the entire psalm, the entire reflection, to its ultimate Christ-centered conclusion. The sermon clearly identifies this everlasting way, not just as some vague concept of living a good or moral life.
It's more specific than that.
Much more specific. It's interpreted as a direct prayer to be led to Christ himself. The sermon anchors this squarely in Jesus' own words in John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Wow. So the way isn't just a path David wants to follow.
It's a person he wants to follow, a person he needs to trust and pursue. It perfectly integrates everything the psalm has explored: God's comprehensive knowledge, his inescapable presence, his formative power, his purifying work. It all points toward our ultimate destiny, which is eternal life and fellowship with Christ.
So it means every detail of your life, which God knows intimately,
Is being sovereignly guided by his surrounding presence,
through his ongoing creative and sanctifying power.
all leading you toward the person of Jesus Christ, the everlasting way.
Wow. This deep dive into Dr. Nichols' sermon on Psalm 139, it's just given such a rich, comprehensive, and incredibly intimate picture of the believer's relationship with God.
It really covers so much ground, doesn't it?
It does. So just to try and synthesize those four massive takeaways we've walked through. First, you are known completely by God's omniscience. Nothing is hidden.
Second, you are surrounded continually by God's omnipresence. You are never alone, never beyond his reach.
Third, you were formed intentionally by God's omnipotence. You are not an accident. You are his artistry.
And fourth, you are being led eternally by God's holiness, guiding you toward himself.
And it all comes back to that initial paradox of being known, doesn't it? That deep fear we have of exposure.
It does. To be fully exposed sounds like it should be terrifying, confirming all our worst fears about ourselves.
But the beautiful, stunning conclusion from the sermon, from the song itself, really is this. God knows absolutely everything about us, every sin, every secret thought, every hidden shame.
And he set his invincible, covenantal, rescuing love upon us anyway, before we even existed.
When Jesus went to the cross, he wasn't dying for some idealized, cleaned-up future version of you.
No. He knew every mistake you would ever make, every selfish motive you'd harbor, every sin you'd struggle with, maybe even cling to.
And he died for the real you. The you that exists right now listening to this. He knew it all, and he chose you still.
Which means you can confidently, without fear, echo David's final prayer. Search me, O God, know my heart. See if there's any grievous way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way.
You can pray that knowing that when God searches the heart of his child, he comes with cleansing, not condemnation. He exposes only to restore, never to destroy.
The ultimate peace, the ultimate rest is found right there. Resting in his all-knowing love, walking securely in his ever-present grace, constantly marveling at his powerful, intricate work in you, and trusting implicitly in his holy guiding hand.
And that really brings us to the sermon's final powerful thought, something for all of you to maybe reflect on this week.
The everlasting way isn't just a path you have to somehow find or struggle to stay on through your own effort. It's a person.
Jesus Christ. The way. The one you simply need to trust.
Trust him to lead you.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, just a reminder, you can find the full resources related to this specific sermon, including any notes or outlines, plus a wealth of other powerful biblical teaching from Dr. Nichols on the Faithful to the Word Ministries website.
That address again is faithfultotheword.com.
And remember, Faithful to the Word Ministries is a 501c3 nonprofit. They are dedicated to sharing God's Word with depth and clarity, and their entire ministry depends on the generous support of listeners like you.
So if this message today resonated, if it brought clarity or encouragement, please do consider visiting the site faithfultotheword.com and making a donation to help them continue this vital work.
Also, we're really excited to let you know about Dr. Nichols' new book. It's called Between Two Trees, and it provides a foundational exploration of key biblical themes running from Genesis to Revelation.
Sounds fascinating, and you can purchase that book directly through their website as well.
That's right. You can find details and purchase Between Two Trees right there on faithfultotheword.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this really extensive deep dive into the heart of Psalm 139. It's been rich.
It really has. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the things that truly matter.